All right. So I'm with Logan Koshenka, and this is actually the second time that we're having this conversation in a way. We talked like what was it, like 9 months ago?
Yeah, something like that.
And I accidentally deleted the files. And I felt so terrible about that because we had such a great conversation.
Yeah, we did. But it's all good. We could do it again.
We can do it again. So why don't
Yeah,
we, you're joining us from Columbus, Ohio. Why don't you give a brief
correct.
introduction of yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Logan. I am 27. I am an iOS engineer for Spotify, which is new
It is new.
from the
It is
last
new.
conversation we had. But yeah, I am from Eastern Ohio, and I enjoy like anything entrepreneurship and tech related. Also into fitness and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and things like that. So yeah, I'm happy to redo this.
How would you describe Columbus, Ohio?
The word that always comes to my mind is underrated. Um,
Okay.
I think there's not like one big thing that it's known for, but I think the city of Columbus has just a lot of underrated factors that whether it's something to do on the weekends or the food scene or like the scenery around town, I think it's a good way to put it would be underrated.
How would you describe so you've been in Silicon Valley, you've been in Austin. What were those experiences like visiting?
Very cool. Very cool. I was in Silicon Valley at 19 or 20 years old, and that really kind of shaped. I knew I had wanted to be involved in entrepreneurship and build my own things, but I didn't know in what context I wanted to do it. And I was out there, I was living in San Mateo in 2015. So I was able to see firsthand at these different tech events and meeting different software engineers that like, oh, this is a very valuable skill, and it was aligned with my interest at the time. So I that that experience is really what led me into learning how to
Yeah.
code, which is cool. And then when I think about Austin, I just think fun. Like that city is very cool. And I feel like anyone could have a good time there. And I feel like there's 100 different ways to have a good time there, whether it's
Yeah.
like the nightlife or hiking or and you think Texas, you think like for me at least growing up in Ohio, when I thought Texas, I thought flat, not necessarily a ton of green, but like Austin and the Lake Travis area, especially right outside of it, there's so much to do outside, and there's popular like public natural pool, swimming hole type deals that people
Yeah.
just go to on weekends, and live music everywhere, and good food everywhere. And Austin was very cool. Um, but yeah, I think those two, traveling to those two cities and living there for an amount of time really kind of helped me appreciate what I like in
Yeah.
cities, and they also affected like my trajectory moving forward and my career and stuff
Yeah.
like that, so that's cool too. But I think there are factors that you learn to like this more than this, and then now that I'm in Columbus I can appreciate certain things that may or may not have been in those other cities that I've lived in.
Elaborate on that. So what are those, the Silicon Valley, Austin, what are they missing that you
um
preferred, that you find valuable?
I think well, I'll start with oh, sorry. The dogs are barking. Can you hear
You're good.
them? I think I'll start with the cost of living because Columbus, Ohio
Hmm.
in general too. It's just like your money goes a lot further. So that's nice. But I don't know. I think just me growing up in Ohio, and this is nothing bad on the people anywhere, but I think uh there's a certain um at least in the big cities, I feel like in Columbus, especially, there's a certain like we're in this together,
Yeah.
welcoming type of vibe. And I did feel that a good bit in Austin and Silicon Valley as well. But I do feel like, Ohio has always been home to me. So I feel like I've meshed with the people in Ohio the best.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's interesting.
yeah.
The people in Silicon Valley and Austin, are there a lot of similarities, especially in probably the circles that you frequent?
Yeah, I think Silicon Valley, in the time that I was there, at least I was in the tech scene. I was attending like this entrepreneurship boot camp accelerator sort of deal, and I was surrounded by people from all over the world, very ambitiously, like going after starting their own company
Yeah.
and raising investor money and doing all of these very exciting things. So that was sort of infectious. That was super cool to be around. And that felt unique. That felt special. And it
Mhm.
was unique because I was in like a program where I was surrounded by these people. Um, but I didn't have too much experience outside of that circle. So I don't feel necessarily qualified to speak on
Yeah.
that. But Austin, yeah, there is some similarities in terms of like Austin and Columbus and um the general vibe when you're out at a bar or something. Like it's a very
Yeah.
fun, patio, indoor slash outdoor bars with
Yeah.
games outside, with live music on, and it's
Yeah.
typically like this young crowd that no one's too good to be there type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like that's I think that's what I appreciate. Like it's wear shorts and sandals if you want. Like no one really cares. And of course, there's your very like high dress code bars, but it's laid back. I guess that's a good way to put
Yeah.
it.
It like lets loose a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and both the other thing to you kind of have to point this out is like the states, Ohio and Texas in general, but also like the city of Columbus and the city of
Yeah.
Austin go absolutely nuts over football. So
Yeah.
like if it's football season and you go anywhere near downtown or campus or anything, that's gonna like
Yeah.
totally engulf you almost. Like there's everywhere you look,
Yeah.
there's um some watch party or tailgating or whatever it is. So Ohio State's
Yeah.
first game is coming up. It's either this
It's
weekend or
Notre
next.
Dame,
And
right?
yeah, it's going to be
You're a big
huge.
college football guy.
Yeah, I love football in general. But I went to Ohio University, so like, and there's a lot of Ohio University people that look at Ohio State like, you know, I don't like them because I didn't go to that school. But
Yeah.
for me, like, if it's Ohio, I'll root for them. But I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not as diehard as everyone around me. But like, it's
Ohio
very cool
State
to go to the
fans
game.
are die hard.
Yeah, yeah. I'll go to the games and stuff, and it's mostly just to appreciate like they're a great football program. So it's like
Yeah.
I'll watch, and it's cool to live here. But yeah, they get serious.
So I've gotten more into college football probably like the last 2 years. I read Nick Saban's biography. And so
Yeah,
like I love following the Alabama program. I'm from Wisconsin. So I follow the Badgers, but the Badgers, like, they're always good, but they're
yeah,
never excellent. And it
yep.
bothers me, because I like rooting and following excellence. Um, what do you think? There's so much something I also love is following the college football landscape and like where it's
Yeah.
going, because I think it also is a parallel of like society in a way and where we're kind
Hmm.
of going in the 21st century. What are kind of your thoughts on the college football realignment and where it's going?
So I just and sorry to say this with you like in Alabama, but like I like seeing last year how Cincinnati was in the playoffs, I believe.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an
I
Ohio
like
team too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in general I like seeing different teams that you don't expect make runs.
Yeah.
Like um like when Texas A&M beat Alabama with Johnny
Yeah.
Manziel before
Yeah.
anyone knew who Johnny Manziel was. Like
Yeah.
in my opinion, like that's what makes college football so cool because
Yeah.
it's like, who in the hell's this guy? It's like
Yeah.
they beat who? And then you see the highlights of how they did it, and you're like, this is crazy. And that could happen to like any team.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do have to appreciate like the consistent programs like Alabama, who's like always there,
Mhm.
because that's insane. That's a crazy dynasty run that they're doing, and Saban
Yeah.
like figured it out. But it is cool seeing, like you said, the landscape's changing, and with the NIL deals,
Yeah.
with all these athletes getting paid, I feel like that's going to shift. I know different states have different advantages now because if an 18-year-old kid wants to, if he's a huge recruit and he can make $1 million on day one of this team and this state, but on this team he can't, like he's not going to go to that team. So that's interesting to see how these laws are like playing out. And it's also interesting to see, I know like Deion Sanders is a head coach at a 1AA school,
Yeah.
the former like best cornerback to ever play. And he got a huge, I think it was last year, he got a huge signing, one of the
Yeah.
best athletes in the country, which was like unheard of at the time. But he's like, I'm
Yeah.
going to go play for Dion. So that's interesting. So I think you'll be seeing more. I feel like the Alabamas and the Ohio State and Michigan looked good last year, and all these different teams that are consistently good will be consistently good. But I think you'll see more and more, maybe upsets, more and more like
Yeah.
random teams that kind of put themselves in the mix that you wouldn't expect before. I'm just glad there's a playoff system because
Yeah.
before, like, it was just the championship and there was just two teams. But I know they're going to expand the playoffs soon too, so that's exciting. But it's crazy. It's
So do you think
very
with
exciting.
the NIL, do you think it helps those like lesser consistent programs, or do you think it hurts them more? Or
I
do you
don't
think it'll just be totally random?
I don't know because I don't feel like I've looked into it enough. I think it's fascinating, but I haven't dug into like the long term outlook of like what will this do to
Yeah.
the small versus big schools. Because you always have
Yeah.
athletes, there's still a limited number of spots. I think when you look at it in that context, like Alabama can't have everyone, Wisconsin can't have everyone that they want. They may be more effective at getting the players that they do want when
Mhm.
it's on this huge stage, when it's, you're going to make an insane amount of money like your first day on campus basically because
Yeah.
you have this big name as a recruit. um, I do think it's great that they're getting paid in general, so for the smaller programs, maybe they can extract better talent or attract better talent to their programs because now it's not like, you know I'm just going to school. Now I'm going to school and I can make money off my name. So I think it'll help the smaller schools just based off of what I know, which isn't much. Uh, with there being limited spots and a limited number of scholarships to give out, I think I think it's kind of the situation where uh, what is it? High tide raises all boats.
Yeah, the rise of I used to say this all the time, but
Yeah,
the
rising
tide
tide.
all boats rise with the tide.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that.
if you can increase the tide, all boats will rise.
Correct. I feel like it's one of that scenario where it's everyone sort of benefits from it.
I'm curious how it'll affect like these older kind of like old school coaches. Like
Hmm.
this is like a pretty new thing that has never really been involved in the game, or at least like
Yeah.
legitimately or like on the surface or whatever. it'll be interesting to see if they're willing to adapt to kind of these new, like the new kind of landscape and players and NILs. And you could see, like, I could see Saban being kind of grouchy about it, whereas like a Lincoln Riley and USC can just like
Yeah,
relate to younger players more. I don't know. It'll be
which
interesting.
I think watching Lincoln Riley at USC is going to be very fun.
I think so
I think they're
too.
going to be very good within the
Yeah.
next few years. But no, I agree. I think part of that, and I got to figure out how I want to word this, but part of their jobs, I mean, college athletes are young men who have just dominated high school football.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, me at 19, 20 years old, like I had an ego. So, I mean, if I'm also a millionaire, like that's interesting to think about. Like, you know, and then you look at transfers, you look at, there's been a lot of in the past, like coaches speaking out against, oh, if you lose a starting job, you should stay on your team and, be there for if an
Yeah.
injury happens or
That's
something. But
that's something
with
we
the
didn't even
transferring,
talk about. Yeah. The transfer
yeah,
portal is wild.
yeah. And I think when the athletes are getting paid, it's like, how does that affect it? I
It's
think
like
it
you become a free agent in a way.
right, right. And there's no, I don't know, if you're making money, there's less of a risk to, I don't know.
I'd be curious too if like players at smaller schools, they have a great season, they can just enter the transfer portal, get paid at some other big school or something. I
Right.
wonder if that will play out. There's all these interesting dynamics now that make it
Yeah.
more interesting to follow, whether it's good or bad. I don't know yet.
Right. Right. It's definitely exciting. And I am glad that they're getting paid.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. And it's it's like the very first time that this has been done. So seeing it play out is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. Um, so why don't you share the story of like how you got interested in software engineering?
Yeah. So I've always sort of been interested in inventing. So I had a notebook when I was a kid, tinkered with different things and drew up designs all the time and kept these ideas. And I got into WordPress blogging in my teens
Oh yeah.
and then was able to sell this website that I made, this blog that I made. And that sort of got me hooked on this like entrepreneurship bug.
What was this blog that you
So
built? What was it about?
it was called Teen Cash Flow,
Okay.
and it basically was to teach teens how to make money. And the
Okay.
uh, I was following different tutorials on all these different people who had made money online through blogging. This would have
Mhm.
been 2010, 2011, and I was learning through there. So I'm blogging about, how to approach your neighbors if you want to cut their grass,
So
or
you're like
if,
15 years old at the time when you're doing this.
yeah, yeah. And um, like I had a list of 100 ways to make money as a teen. Um, if you live in a cold climate, you can shovel snow out of driveways,
Okay.
sidewalks, things of that nature. Yeah, all these different ideas, and just sort of kept blogging, not really knowing what the end goal was, but then uh, almost a year later discovered a website flipping website
No.
called
Nice.
a website flipping website called Flippa, and I was able to list it on there and sell it. So that gave me like a bug that
Yeah.
was like I was hooked and I wanted to continue down that route and create things and build things. So at the time I still couldn't code. It was just this limited WordPress knowledge, but I had some money saved up from that sale and I paid a development firm to build the next idea that I had, which was like an expertise sharing website. The idea was that I always Googled things, and I would just Google everything that I couldn't figure out. I would YouTube it, Google it. When I knew someone that was knowledgeable in that area, it was way easier. I could just ask that person questions. So I thought of a website where you could have a profile, list the top 3 to 5 things that you're knowledgeable in. Here's my jam. Here's my areas of expertise. And then people could find you and ask you questions. I had no idea what I was doing in terms of the business. And I just kept like attending these different pitch events. And I had this like terrible website developed for me and no users, and was just really trying to get it off the ground. And I was sort of learning as I went. And I got accepted into this program in Silicon Valley for entrepreneurs, essentially like an entrepreneurship boot camp.
Okay.
And there they basically coach you on your business. And that was where I learned a ton in terms of like, well, why would someone want to be on this website if they're not searching for advice? Like, why would I list my area of expertise? Am I getting paid? Do I get credits? Do I get anything in return? And it's like, I never even thought of this. And I'm just like a 19-year-old clueless kid at the time, like, oh, that's a good point. Like, I always just thought if you build it, they'll show up. But there was real work involved that like I was able to start doing. So it was very valuable. It was very useful. I met a ton of people. The program was very international, made a ton of friends, and met several engineers. And my startup had failed. We pitched to investors. It was a great experience, but I essentially failed because I had nowhere to go with it, couldn't recruit anybody. But I just thought to myself, you know, I'm young. If I learn how to code, then I'll really have no excuse to fail. I really won't have this like, oh, I couldn't recruit anybody as an excuse. It's just that I would be able to build the ideas that I had. And that was incredibly attractive to me. The idea that I could have a idea in my mind and then just begin building it. So I taught myself iOS development over the next, you know, really several years, but that first year was like a giant push into iOS development. So I would make myself do 3 hours a day in terms of tutorials online.
Wow.
And launched a few apps on campus during college. I had returned home back to Ohio University to finish my undergraduate. But I knew what I wanted to do. So that was an exciting period in college, because the goal wasn't get a computer science degree. The goal was like graduate as soon as possible and build as many apps as you can. And that's kind of how I looked at it. And I launched a couple social apps on campus that flopped because I was still learning and a one-man team and didn't know as much. And I had a game that was a bit successful. So that was exciting. And then it just led to, it was a process of like, okay, this is a little better. This is a little better. This is a little better. And I think down the road that translated more into like professional iOS positions, where I worked at a firm in Seattle and then JP Morgan Chase and now Spotify. So I do miss the involvement that I had in these independent projects, and I'm starting to get back into them now because I feel myself working, and I'm like, I miss building my own apps. So I'm doing that now, sort of publicly. I created a YouTube channel to do tutorials on. And I think I'm going to be posting a lot more of like story type videos of like, maybe sort of vlog / documentary feeling type videos of me releasing an app on a more regular basis. So that's what
Okay.
I'm looking forward to now, like weekends and evenings. That'll be like my passion project. But yeah, I was incredibly excited to get the job at Spotify. So I'm coming up on like 3 months there now. So love
Okay.
it. Super cool. And I'm just glad that like that experience of being like, oh, I need to teach myself how to code has led to all these very exciting things, all these different people I've met because I built this app in college and I met this friend that was interested in doing the same thing, whether it's coworkers at Chase or Spotify, all of the above. It's very glad I got involved in it.
What before we talk about Spotify, I'm really curious about
Yeah.
Spotify. How important was self-education in this process and just trial and error, doing it, failing, doing it again, and
I
going
mean,
again?
it was really the only thing. It was I knew that after talking to the different software engineers, that I knew that there'd be a huge learning curve. So I I really utilized different online tutorials and like e-learning platforms and just forced myself for the first, it was
Mm.
most of that first year, I would force myself to do like 3 hours a day. And I would have like a calendar where I would mark off, like, did you do 3 hours today?
That takes a lot of
And
dedication. 3 hours a
yeah,
day. Yeah.
yeah. And it's tough. I mean, especially in the beginning, like 3 hours of failing, really, like 3 hours of
It's
being like
so like
so,
demoralizing. Yeah. When you
yeah,
first start. Yeah.
of just being lost. So I got through like the sludge of just like, huh, I gotta go through this. And slowly but surely you notice different patterns and your brain starts to recognize like, oh, I've seen this before and we know how to do this part. So if this is similar to this, maybe this is how you do it. And I mean, a lot of it to this day for me is still like getting on Stack Overflow. Like any software engineer will tell you, like a lot of the job involves like Googling this specific error that they came across. But um, I think just more and more experience is the key. It's just like
Yeah.
putting in your reps, the whole 10,000 hours thing, like just go.
Yeah. So tell me about Spotify. How's that
Yeah,
been?
so I was at Chase and didn't really see myself being there long term. The team I was on and everything, and have some friends in the tech industry now that work for these like more exciting big tech companies with, way higher salaries and benefits and, the flashy brand names and stuff. And
Yeah.
I thought, I'm doing the same exact job for a different company. So it's not like this
Yeah.
person is, I mean, they may be better or worse as a software engineer,
Yeah.
but like I I thought I'm doing the same thing. It's not a
Mhm.
totally different job. If I'm doing the exact same job that they're doing just at a different company, then like I could work at these companies too. So
Yeah.
that was my mindset. And I I'm not sure if you know the interview process for like software engineers is
Tell me
the
about this. I
reputation.
want to know about
The,
this.
yeah, the reputation for it is pretty scary because you have to do typically you do like a phone screening
Okay.
where that's essentially to weed out and this isn't any one company I'm talking about here. It's pretty much standard across the board with some flexibility and some differences for each one. But typically there's a phone call with a recruiter that saw your application and wants to make sure you're like a real human that's not crazy and that you have like people skills. And then they
Yeah.
schedule like a phone screen or a tech screen is what they'll call it, where you typically would do a live coding exercise, which is essentially like I describe it to my girlfriend as like a puzzle, but
Okay.
like a software engineering puzzle, like a math problem to solve. And it's live and you don't know the question beforehand. So it's a little high
It's like
pressure.
on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're timed. You have like 1 hour and the first 10 minutes is a greeting, and then you have to solve like two of these in 20 minutes each. And
Oh,
you may have a solution, but it may not be the optimal solution. So then you have to talk
okay.
about like what you would do to improve this. You have to know how efficient your solution
Mm,
is. There's this thing called the big O notation, and the big
okay.
O basically measures the efficiency of your algorithm. So that's the first part, and that's essentially to weed out anyone that's like not even supposed to be there. And that part's hard. Like, it's
Yeah,
tough.
I couldn't do that. I'm not a
And
software engineer, but
it's tough, and you have to really prepare for your
okay.
interviews if you're a software engineer. And like, it it's a lot of the skills are the same, but
Mhm.
a lot of people in the tech industry will argue that it's like a separate skill entirely, like interviewing, and then the things that you do day to day
Oh,
are like not the best representation. But I mean, it is what it is.
so if you're doing it
Um,
live, can you Google search errors or no? You have to know all this
no,
stuff.
some interviewers will say like, so when you code, there's essentially like an autocomplete that will like suggest different functions that you may be trying to find. So if you forget something like that, some interviewers may be like, and if you forget, what exactly it's named or
Okay.
something, you can Google that. But typically, no. Typically, it's
Okay.
like, unless they say, and feel free to read up for a second on, this specific thing I'm asking you about in case you need a refresher. Uh,
Yeah.
but typically, like, you don't Google anything. But yeah, so you get through the tech screen, which is tough, and then you'll have an on-site. And what the on-site is usually 4 to 5 hour long interviews. And a lot of times you can break this up over like 1 day or 2 days. And
Okay.
I went through the interview process with like a few of the larger tech companies, and it's usually two coding, which is the same thing as a tech screen, but like they just hit you from different areas. So like
Okay.
they want to, like, for me, for iOS, I need to have enough knowledge in like iOS specific topics, and also like general software engineering algorithmic type questions. And then there would be like a behavioral interview where it's like, will this person fit with our team?
Mhm.
Are they good at communicating? And then there's a system design, which is my least favorite. And the system design is essentially a whiteboarding session where you're not coding,
Okay.
but they'll say like, how would you build Instagram? And you have to map out with diagrams. Like, okay, this is our database, and I would call this class this, and our data would be fetched from here. And I think we could use this sort of pattern on our, like, it's very nerve wracking, because I had an interview with a very large tech company that was
Okay.
like initially my dream to work there.
Okay.
And now looking back, like, I'm so glad it didn't work out, but I made it to the on-site, and
Mhm.
I felt good
Is
about
the
like,
on-site did you go to California for this?
no, since like the COVID thing happened,
Oh, COVID. Okay.
they'll call it the on-site. And in the
Okay.
past you would have been flown out to the headquarters and do these in person, but it'd be a virtual on-site now. So like all
Okay.
the on-sites I did were virtual. But I had my systems design interview, and my interviewer was 8 minutes late. And the entire time, like, that system design interview is so tough because it's sort of a discussion where I'm leading the
Okay.
conversation as the interviewee, and I'm saying, so do you have a preference on whether I use this or this? And you're hoping the person gives you a little bit of like feedback. My interviewer barely said anything. It was just like, sure, go ahead. What do you think? And I'm like, it was so nerve wracking, and I just wanted this job very badly. And um, at the end of the onsite, I thought like this could go either way. Like, I feel pretty good about these two I did. I feel iffy about this one, but maybe I'm thinking too much. And I got rejected, and was like heartbroken. And then
Mm,
Spotify, that entire time I'm interviewing with all these different companies, had sort of I was talking to like two different recruiters. I think they were coordinating on who I was supposed to talk to. And I hadn't heard back from them for like 3 weeks.
okay.
And then I get like I turned down a couple offers that weren't like, I just didn't see myself working there for whatever reason. And I got rejected from a couple as well that were like solid companies. And then Spotify, after that whole process, they reached back out. And my plan after, it didn't work out was, all right, I'm going to practice all of these concepts for the rest of
Mhm.
the year. It would this year. So like 2022, I was going to
Yeah.
just really like get back to my like 3 hours a day thing, maybe do like
Yeah.
an hour a day in the morning, like whatever it would be. My plan was to practice all year. And then at the end of the year, just give a giant push and like
Yeah.
apply everywhere, send out, all these different resumes and do some sample work for companies and really like make a push to get a new job. But I had still been fresh from the interviewing. So I was like, sure. And got in touch with Spotify and Uber actually, and
Okay.
interviewed with them like at the same exact time. And then the Spotify on site, I had scheduled it like 3 weeks away. So I had time to prepare for that. And the Uber was like the week after.
Okay.
So I did my Spotify on site and I just knew like the people that I interviewed with, and I can like even more so the people that I work with now
Hmm.
are incredible. And just interviewing with them, it was the
Wow.
opposite of the other experience that I had where the people were like, it felt like they were on your side. They wanted you to
Yeah.
succeed. And I had great conversations. And once I knew I got the Spotify gig, like I knew I was getting an offer, I'm like, I'm not even, I canceled the interview with Uber. Like I
Yeah.
think the Uber job would have been very cool,
Hmm.
but just thinking about the brand of Spotify and like
Yeah.
it's something I use daily, and I just love everything they stand
Yeah.
for, and I had such a good experience. I was like, I want this.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm coming up on 3 months. I've been to New York twice where my team is based, but my team being based there means like the office is there. A lot of
Okay.
my team is is all over the world. So that's very cool that, I work with people from everywhere, and,
Yeah.
like team activities in New York that we did. And my first week there was like a big field day where
Okay.
we took a ferry across the Hudson River and um, spent a day at this huge park playing games, and like it's incredible. And I feel incredibly lucky to work there. And um, I remember when I was interviewing, my recruiter said like, I've only been here a few months, and I'm just shocked at. I think I asked a question of like, what's your favorite part about working there?
Yeah.
And she told me, I've only been here a few months, and everyone's so nice. I'm waiting for it to like snap back to
Yeah.
reality. She's like, but it hasn't happened yet. And now I get what she was saying, because like
Okay.
everyone around you is so willing to help, so welcoming to new hires, so like collaborative and open to feedback. And it's very cool.
Oh.
So
Uh,
yeah.
a friend of mine, he said something that really struck me, and that's Spotify is the single app in his life that enhances his life without a doubt and makes his experience living better. That
Wow.
Spotify single app is the greatest app that he has, you know.
That's
And
interesting. And like it makes sense.
yeah, it's like music is so a part of each of us, even though we all listen to different types of music, that like, I'm using it too every
Right.
single day. And it's like, it's cool that, especially that you're able to work at a company and be building and being a part of an app and a company that enhances so many people's lives on a daily basis. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I said, I feel incredibly lucky to work there. Uh yeah, I think the other cool thing is too, they really take care of their employees. Like the company is the company has like European values because they're based out of Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh, interesting.
And just we we have like a wellness week, for example, where we don't have to work um this week coming up um down the road. It's not anytime soon, but
Yeah.
they announced it. It's just as a wellness week to like
Do whatever you
relax
gotta do.
and yeah, and rest and recharge and whatever it is. So like things like that and
Mm,
different benefits that they offer, those sorts of like company values, those sorts of things that the company does to take care of their employees is so cool to see, especially because I'm just used to like we want to get absolutely every ounce out of you that we can in terms of you better work and like
yeah.
the very aggressive like capitalistic values of your typical um so it's new to me and it's very cool. Like it's a lot different from what I've done in the past
Mhm.
and in a very good way. So yeah, I hope I'm at Spotify for a long time.
Yeah. Elaborate more on working on teams as a software engineer. What exactly does that mean? And like I've talked to other engineers and they always team, team. They always mention the word team and my team, we did this and you know, um, we got together as a team and did that. And your team's members of your team are all over the world. Like, how does that work as a software engineer?
Yeah, so I think that's something that'll depend like on different companies with different goals. um for example, my team at Chase, I think the easiest way to describe it is that you separate certain responsibilities into teams.
Okay.
Um, my sole focus at Chase was anything investment related. So like mobile investment team was what I did at Chase. And so that included features on like investment dashboards. Like if you open an account within the Chase or JP Morgan iOS app, like
Mhm.
that was our realm of things to work on.
Okay.
And there were a couple teams that did have overlap, but typically I feel like it is pretty standard across the board to separate these teams in terms of specific areas of responsibility. So I work on the ads at Spotify in a more
Okay.
like specific way, like a more internal way. Um, but typically these teams will have 1 to 2 engineers of a certain discipline. So you might have like 2 iOS, 2 Android, um, a web engineer or two, or it just depends on the company and what
Okay.
you're doing. Like I think my team size at Chase was roughly 12. We had like three
Okay.
iOS, 3 Android, um, but no designers on our team.
Mm,
Whereas like other companies may have designers that mix in with a certain team too. So it's interesting in terms of passing requirements from
okay.
like product teams over to your engineers. So typically like at Chase, we had a person on our team that was in charge of saying like, okay, here's what they want.
Okay.
So they would pass these requirements on to the engineers, where my job was really just like get a requirement and finish it and like do the task. Which is a bit different at Spotify, where I have more of a voice. I have more autonomy to say like, you know, I think a better way to do this could be this, and then
Mhm.
a lot of the discussions at Spotify are more open to that sort of collaboration where you
Okay.
may have some sort of input that someone else didn't see before, and that could change the requirements that you may be pursuing at the time. So I think it's a very broad term to have a team. And I know like smaller companies might have like 3 people on a team, might
Yeah.
have like one iOS, one Android, and like one business side. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
very it varies a lot, but I think the easy way to understand it for me would be like, what's this team's responsibility? And then just understand that everyone on this team is working toward this one goal. And then when you
Okay.
think about a giant company like a Spotify, like there's many teams. So then that kind of moves in unison.
Interesting. Where do you see the internet in the next like 10 years?
Oh man, I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. I think there's some exciting developments. I think like blockchain technology is very exciting. And I think the whole metaverse, VR, AR thing is also that those two things in my head, I think like phases and a fad kind of comes and
Okay.
goes,
Okay.
but I feel like blockchain and mixed reality, whether it's VR or AR, I feel like those things have kind of proved already, like
Yeah.
they're not really going anywhere. So it's exciting to think about what those will kind of evolve into.
What kinds of things can be utilized on the blockchain? Like what examples of how we live life within the next 5 years can be like sourced back to blockchain?
Yeah, so I just want to preface this by saying like I don't know a ton. I'm still sort of in the research, figure it out stage, but from what I understand, I think different sales are a very likely scenario. Whether it's like tickets to an event or like major online transactions, just because of the way the blockchain's set up with the ledger. There's this decentralized way of saying this person definitely bought this thing.
Okay.
And you don't know who the person is. It's just a series of like letters and numbers. It's just an ID. It would be, I believe, the wallet purchased this.
Okay.
So I think when you think about it in that, you look at like QR codes. Instead of
Yeah.
scanning that to walk in a museum, that could likely be an NFT. Or yeah, I think there's interesting things to think about in like real estate too, like buying a house or a plane ticket, tickets to a concert, tickets to any type of event. I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm
Yeah.
certainly not an expert on it, so I'm interesting to kind of see it play out as well.
What excites you most about the future?
Um, I think it's very cool to look at this idea of like decentralization. I think the internet sort of brings on this open opportunity to everyone. So I think the thing that excites me most about the future is that continued trend of like there being almost no barrier to entry to do the thing that you want to do. So you take music artists, for example, like the gatekeeping that would take place in the 80s and 90s, like you needed a
Mhm.
record label. Some like old white guy would just decide if you were good enough. Like
Mhm.
that's crazy now.
Mhm.
Whereas a 16-year-old kid could record something in their closet and upload it and like buy equipment off Amazon and upload it online and attract fans. And it's like no one can really tell you like whether or not you're allowed to create music, because that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, podcasting,
Mhm.
the barrier to entry has been, it's really like letting the market decide, like you decide what YouTube videos you watch, you decide what music you listen to.
Yeah.
And that may be a huge artist, or that might be a upcoming artist. So that is what excites me. I think this idea that like everyone has a shot, everyone has their opportunity to do what they want to do, whether it's producing a certain type of content, or like starting a certain type of business, or whatever it may be. Like we were talking about college football, we may see a rise in like college football athletes, like producing content and vlogging, or sharing like what life is like behind the scenes and things of that nature.
Mm.
And that could be another avenue for that athlete to like make money, or get new fans, or whatever it may be. So I think the thing that excites me about the future is like the elimination of like barriers of entry to different fields, I guess. Like me learning how to code, like the internet is the reason I was able to learn how to code, because I taught myself through online tutorials. If I grew up in the age like before those were available, then I would have had to get like a computer science degree, which nothing wrong with that, but
Mhm.
there's no gatekeeping. It's like if I got hired for my first job because I've built apps, but like no one had to. I didn't need anyone's permission to build the apps. I just had to figure it out. And it's the
How
same
much
with.
how much did
Go
it
ahead.
cost you to teach yourself the skills?
Less than like total. I mean, I already had the laptop. That would have been the most cost. But I was, any courses I bought were $10 to $20. Maybe an ebook for like $49, but
Yeah.
typically free $10, $20 like big courses online.
Mhm.
So I would say less than 500 total, which is crazy.
Yeah. And now you're a software engineer at Spotify.
Yeah, very cool to think about.
Now, how much do you ever think about how, say, you and I, for example, it seems like we were born at the right time where we can see what's kind of happening with the landscape and the technology and the software, where like we're able to kind of design our lives in a way we have more control in a sense.
Yeah,
It feels like we were born at the right time, as far as if
yeah,
we're looking at kind of human history and controlling our own lives and dreams.
yeah. No, I agree. I think we have this unique experience of like witnessing the change of that landscape and the rise of the internet. And I know for me personally, I'm sort of hesitant to get too involved with certain, like if I'm using my phone for too long, there's like this thing in my head that's like, put your phone down, go outside, go do
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
Because I used to do that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think not only that, but like catching opportunities and seeing like, oh, this person was successful at the rise of this period, and like this person was early on this trend and stuck with it, and now they're the biggest person in that space. And it's cool to see, like I'm always thinking about like entrepreneurship, and from a business perspective, it's very cool to see the opportunities that are now available because of the internet. And this does relate to the last question too, with the gatekeeping, but like not only that, but I mean, if you sell t-shirts and you're a business, before the internet, you sold to your city, you sold to your
Yeah,
local, whoever came in your store, and now your store could be on Shopify and reach
yeah.
millions of people.
Instead of
So
having to
that's
buy all that inventory and then having to physically move it within your geographical scape, you could have someone have the t-shirts there, print it and ship it. All you have to do is like the front end
exactly.
transactions. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Well, this has been another phenomenal conversation. Appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you.